welcome to this episode 256 of Frame and Reference. You're about to drop into a conversation between me, Kenny McMillan, and my guest, James Whitaker, ASC, DP of DTF St. Louis. Enjoy.
You know, it was funny. I was like, oh shit, I should probably do research. And then I'd been bad at my ASC reading. I got stacks of them. And so I went through all the ones still covered in plastic, and I was like, oh no, we do have Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die.
It's in there.
It is in there. And you got a big, nobody read it. It's like half of the magazine.
I know, it was fantastic. I mean,
with Project Hail Mary on the cover.
I know. I have to say, I feel lucky because, Greg brought in a big audience, and then, so more people read the article, which is cool. Cool for me. And yeah, Stephen and magazine gave me a giant spread, which is fantastic. Super cool.
I can't imagine that's your first time.
No, I've had a few articles in there, but this has been a good spell with Good Luck and DTF coming out at the same time. But yeah, I've been in the magazine a few times. Yeah.
Yeah. The Good Luck is a film right up my alley. That's like I love sci-fi. I love absurd shit. I love comedies,
Yeah. It was made for you.
Yeah.
We had some of our first screenings were I wouldn't call them nerd fests, but truly like fan fests.
Right.
It was just like film fan fest, sci-fi fan fest. And it was just like, people just went bonkers for the film. It was super exciting.
Was it not like Comic-Con or anything?
No, like Beyond Fest, Beyond Fest.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
There's one in Texas. Yeah, exactly. There were a couple of those really early on that I was kind of on DTF for. So I was like, I'd fly home for just one screening just because I wanted to see it on the big screen at the Egyptian Theater, which was just...
Oh, wow.
Yeah, exactly. And to see Gore speak, because Gore's just like... he's a brainiac. He's the kid of a rocket scientist, so he's always the smartest person in the room. It's always fun listening to him talk.
It is funny. You get people like Jim Cameron or whoever who are always like, well, that guy, that's a genius, right? And then you do look at Gore Verbinski's list, his CV, and you're like, has he had a miss? I think he might be low key one of the better directors out there.
Yeah, not in my mind. I think all of his films have been entertaining one way. And, They've made a lot of money.
Yeah. How'd you even get linked up with him? Because do you find that it's like a thing at your level where it's, because obviously with me, it's like, oh, you get one job that looks like another job that someone wants and blah, blah, blah. Like, is it once you hit Marvel, they're like, oh, let's get him for big film. And then you're allowed to do small film again?
I wish, yeah. I mean, I wish Marvel opened the doors that much, but yeah, I agree with you. It's so easy to get pigeonholed in this business, and I think that has been one thing I've been pretty lucky with because my films have, gone a range from, really strange dramas to, a lot of. Satire, which I love, like Thank You for Smoking was sort of satire. Good Luck, Have Fun was satire. DTF St. Louis, some people could say it's satire in a way. So I've been kind of lucky in that route, not having gotten pigeonholed. But the Gore Verbinski thing basically came about because in between Pirates 1 and Pirates 2, he couldn't get Darius Wolski to shoot a tiny little music video for him in Los Angeles. Nice. And so somehow my name got plopped in front of him and he was like, yeah, sure, this guy, I guess. Yeah, anyway. But then, we discovered he and Steve Conrad actually have a relationship, right, from DTF because, and that's kind of to go back around, like DTF St. Louis came around in 2015 because Steve had seen a film that he really liked that I shot. And then when Patriot, sorry, not DTF St. Louis, but when Patriot came out, Gore Verbinski reached out to Steve because they're really, really close friends because Steve had written The Weatherman and that Gore had directed. And so, and Gore was like, who's your DP? This guy's great. And Steve was like, it's Jimmy Whitaker. And he goes, oh my God, I've already worked with him. We did a music video like 3 years ago. So we started having lunches and having some dinners, plenty of margaritas and tacos and just talking about like what project would fit for Gore and I. And then good luck came around and gave me a call, and it was like, let's go.
Yeah. I can't remember who I asked recently, but we were ruminating about the idea of having a look as a DP versus, I guess, what would the opposite be? Like being malleable, but people liking you as a person, I suppose. I don't know what the opposite of having a look is, but it is funny how sometimes you can see something and you're like, oh, that was Greg, or, whatever. And then sometimes you get told and you're like, oh, of course.
Of course. Yeah. It clicks. You're like, of course that's him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Janusz, you always know a Janusz film. Right?
Yeah.
Like it's always got a signature Janusz look. I kind of like to have a signature look, like in some respects. Like I like framing my close-ups in a certain way that maybe people recognize, but I guess most people wouldn't go, the same DP shot that shot that. So yeah.
It's kind of like when people talk about, how like DV and VHS is kind of coming back in fashion with younger people. It's like it's only explained by the failures of the medium. Like it's the outside edge cases, and it's the same thing with like how do you know it was Bob Richardson? Oh, well, he hot spotted one of those tables. That must be him. But otherwise, you're just like, yeah, it's normal coverage. I don't know, like just not.
Yeah. I mean, I think that goes to the bigger conversation: is should we be having a signature look?
Yeah.
Or should we kind of disappear more into the story? I kind of favor that idea that we're doing whatever is appropriate for the story. What do you think?
Well, it's funny. I was just thinking about this last night, looking stuff up, because I had seen you say, in other interviews, like, I'm not trying to be Mr. Look guy. And, I've done 260 of these now. And the vast majority of DPs say, oh yeah, whatever the story. And part of me always wonders, like, is that how you really feel? Or are you letting directors know that you're not going to steamroll them?
I actually have a new opinion about that. I'm going to be quite
wonderful.
honest with you. And I'm happy to put it out there too. And that is that I do think story should be the informer of what we do, right? Like it has to be. Like, and of course the director you're working with is going to inform a lot, right? But I think, our job as cinematographers shouldn't just be to follow the story, because that could be, you read line 1, establishing shot. What is that? That could be the most boring shot in the world. Or you can elevate the story, like elevate. So my whole thing is now, it's like, I think what we should be doing is elevating as a cinematographer. We shouldn't just be doing, unless it's an absolute dictum from the director, like it should feel absolutely ordinary or whatever it is he's going for. I think we should be trying to elevate things and make this an experience. And, that's what I tried to do on DTF quite a lot, was connect some of the thoughts, some of the ideas of the story to the characters with visuals. And I'm hoping that maybe we were able to elevate things a little bit in DTF.
Oh yeah. I mean, it certainly, it has its own, like any, screenshots you see of it, you're like, yeah, that's from, that's DTF. It doesn't look, because obviously a lot of people talk about things looking samey. I don't necessarily agree with it, but that seems to be how audiences feel. DTF, not samey at all. Widow's Bay, not samey at all. There's a handful of shows out there that look, I guess we've passed realism into really well done heightened realism as what I feel is becoming the norm. And I'm very much enjoying that, because that heightened isn't a linear scale in one direction. It can be any version of heightened, even have fun. It's realistic as much as it can be, but it doesn't look, like a documentary.
Right.
Which I think a lot of stuff can blend together now that docs can look so good with so little equipment.
That's true. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel, just to say it, like, I agree with that. I think you're right. It's like, look, if DTF had been taken straight from the page and given just kind of the look where it landed, the story landed in a suburb, like it could be very ordinary and feel quite ordinary and maybe not so interesting to stay involved to the story. So, our goal was to, by the way, that was something I was absolutely terrified about this show, because I've been working with Steve Conrad now for 10 years on Patriot and on Perpetual Grace. I even was a consulting cinematographer on his stop motion animation show, which was called The Ultra City Smiths. And so we have a lot of time between us. But Patriot was like, Chicago and Milwaukee, but then also European look. So it had built-in stunningness to it. Like it had built-in architecture that made things interesting. And that was true with season 2 was Paris. We shot the whole thing in Paris. Our next show, Perpetual Grace Limited, was a Western. And we shot it in Santa Fe. So it had built-in visual eye candy. So when I got these scripts for DTF St. Louis, I was a little like, okay, this is like suburban malaise, right? These sort of middle-aged folk who are kind of dealing with some of the boredoms of life, new stages of their life. And it's in very suburban, parks and houses and backyards. And how are we gonna make this interesting? So that was definitely a little terrifying. But you could go in there and you could just be like, all right, I'm gonna give this a look. You know what I mean? And it could be like super colorful, hyper colorful, or like burning shafts of light through windows and, really strong. But for me, I wanted to keep the drama real, right? Like I felt like the drama much more than the comedy was the important part of it. Like the deep, meaningful stuff between, friendships between middle-aged people was like super important for us to bring out, and a new theme for Steve to explore, although he's explored some of that in the past. But, so it was like, how do we connect these characters within frames that make it feel meaningful? And then, when you're in the suburbs, it's like, when you're at a school playground, how do you make a scene feel like fish out of water? Like, for example, there's a scene that I love how Steve cut that scene. I don't think it starts on a wide shot because, Steve oftentimes will use an establishing shot one of two ways. One, to establish where you are, or save that for later in the edit so that you can then reveal where you are, right?
Yeah, sure.
I love that so much. So, you're and tight close-ups of a couple guys on a swing having very intimate relationship, and then cut wide at the end of it to see where they are. And, our wide shots and kind of our framings in general were kind of intentionally made so that audiences would feel a little off kilter. Like they would feel a little bit like, things aren't normal here. And that carried throughout all the interiors as well, inside of the police station with really, I don't want to say strange framings, but intentionally off-putting framings that would kind of make you feel like, maybe Jason Bateman's character doesn't feel comfortable in this space,
Yeah. You had mentioned in other interviews that you and Steve, after working for a while together, that part of your relationship is challenging each other. And I was wondering if you could unpack that a little bit, because I've mentioned this before, but like I have now worked with my college friend who I've known for almost 15 years now on a few projects. And he's a director and he's a producer, and his first documentary, he got nominated for an Emmy. Very, good filmmaker. But that's just my buddy from college. Yeah. So our first few goings outs were a little more like me going, I know more than you about the camera stuff. You can barely turn it on, and then,
right. Yeah.
And then learning kind of what you're saying, like the emotional image is different than the technical image, and to listen harder. How do you get past that with the new director into where you are with Steve, where you're comfortably challenging each other? And what does that look like?
Well, I think you could stay on the example of Steve because, our relationship started on the pilot episode of Patriot in 2015. And, we were new to each other. We'd had a nice conversation. We had a nice interview in Los Angeles. And, the thing that came up in that meeting, and it started right then and there because he's become sort of the perfect partner, but it started in that meeting. And that he said to me, how can I get you to shoot this show? And why don't you like shooting TV? Because at that point, TV was a pretty different thing. Like, prime TV, like really quality TV. There was good TV.
West Wing.
Yeah, exactly. The really good stuff has now started around 2015 or 2013, something like that. So it was a new thing. And And I was terrified of shooting television because it felt to me like the first thing that went out the window was cinematography.
Yeah.
And, because you're shooting a schedule. And, maybe it's the style of cinematography and TV that was happening back then where you threw 3 cameras at everything. And, directors didn't really care about light always, and producers and studios. And so the content that was put out was much lower. And so Steve and I in that very first meeting had he said to me, what is it? And I said, well, it's just, why are we doing an 18 mil wide shot and a 300 mil close up at the same time? That makes no sense to me. There's got to be a better way. Why do we need 45 shots today? If you're doing 6 pages of content, you know what I mean? So, and he was like, okay, well, what would you do? And why doesn't that work? He was like an open book. Like, why doesn't that work? Well, because it makes it impossible to get the diffusion in much closer so that your actor looks like, $1 million. So, and he's like, well, what would you recommend? I was like, well, as much as possible, let's shoot this one camera. And I promise you every single time that I can get a second camera in there and make it look 95% as good as the first camera, then let's do it. And he's like, this is great. And I was like, Steve, I've just read your pilot script. It's unbelievably good writing. And why can't we just trust the writing? Why do we need a million pieces of coverage to cut out of it? Like, if you're on the day and you're seeing a performance from somebody who we cast, which is, say, Michael Dorman or Aliette Ofim, it's like if you're seeing an unbelievable performance, then you trust it and you move on and you walk away from a day having 12 to 14 setups that are ideal and you're not making sacrifices. And he goes, oh, this is great. And then it became like a challenge to him. Wow, this is fantastic. Let's break more rules. And so for him, it was like stunts was a big one. It's like, I don't want to do stunts in a million pieces of coverage. It feels like a Marvel movie and everybody's watching Marvel movies. Let's do something different. Okay, cool. Let's study Old Boy and let's do our action scenes in a wide shot. You know what I mean? So, and we've been pushing that way, but collaborating that way too. Like, what if, like, for years we would shot list for hours and hours and hours, usually over a beer at a bar. And it would just be, like, this is hilarious. Who can come up with the funnier idea or the better way to block the scene or and if we got stuck, it would be Steve telling me what is the essential part of the scene? What is the elemental part of this 4-page scene that we're trying to convey? And let's start with that. Let's find the one shot that is important to tell that scene. And then let's build shot structure around that and see if that works. And so this back and forth between him and I has been ideal. And yeah, we push each other a lot. And more so in a way that's new. In a way, he has my back more than ever because, the trust is just unbelievably strong. But he's also much more savvy than he was when we started 10 years ago regarding camera and lighting. And now he gets it. It's like he needs me, but he doesn't need me as much as he did back then, maybe.
Sure.
And, he knows the time of day. Like he even in our production meeting on DTF, it was the best thing ever. And every DP would love this story. And that is, and I didn't ask him to do this. He literally said in the production meeting to every single crew member, all the people that were in charge of making a schedule in the studio, that if we're in bad light, we will not be shooting. So don't schedule the day this way. And now that we're all on the same page about that, let's all work toward the goal of, making a great show. But, bad light for him, say midday, top, sunny, whatever it is, if there's no way for me to control it, like if you're in a wide shot or whatever, that for him is a spell breaker. It's not just I don't like how this shot looks, lighting-wise. It's a true spell breaker. Like it'll pop him out of a scene emotionally. So for him, it's super important that we get every single time right. So we spend a relentless amount of time on our shows, particularly on DTF St. Louis, scheduling our days. We'll make actors shoot out of order. We'll start one scene and start in close-ups, pop wide. But then if we need to cheat or reverse because, when we turn around, the house is front lit that we're looking at we'll wait until the sun's gotten past that front lit part of it and we'll go shoot something else for a couple hours. And, Steve's such a trusting guy that, he builds these incredible relationships with actors as well as the crew members that he, they get on board with those ideas. I can't think of a single time where the actors were like, God damn it, it's all Jimmy's fault. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry, that was a long ramble.
No, people listen to this for you, not for me. I also have liquid. But your approach to spicy liquid, your approach to coverage probably helps inform that, though, right? If you're not like hyper covering a scene, you've got the time to wait if you're going to get these 5 angles or whatever, and not 30.
Yeah.
Is that right? Or is roughly?
Yeah, that's right. And look, we did more coverage on DTF St. Louis than on previous shows. And that in my personal opinion was that the other shows had a real central character that was kind of our guiding force as to whose POV every scene should be related to. So it was Michael Dorman's character in Patriot, and it was Jimmy Simpson's character in Perpetual Grace Limited. And yes, there is definitely probably a central character, and that's David Harbour's character, is kind of what the story is about. But
crushed it, by the way.
Who absolutely crushed it, right? Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah. I kept telling him along the way, like, man, this is so inspiring for me to watch, and like, you're just crushing it. But like on this show, it felt like oftentimes people were on even ground. There were times, when it was the interviews with the cops where that was not even ground, right? But it oftentimes between at least Linda, Jason, and David, we weren't trying to get a POV across of like, this is this person's scene. So we ended up doing a lot more, I wouldn't say traditional coverage, but like if we shot a close-up of you, we would also shoot a close-up of me. Whereas in Patriot, sometimes we would just take whoever's scene it was, shoot a wide shot, and then that one person's coverage whose scene it was. And maybe we would shoot the reverse, maybe. And, it was interesting.
Do you find that scares the shit out of post in actuality, or does the idea of that scare editors and producers and stuff?
You know what I mean? I think editors enjoy having lots of options. And, in the case of DTF, we shot all these opposing angles, but that doesn't mean Steve used them. Do you know what I mean? Right. Like I would often shoot like close-up of Richard Jenkins, and then let's offer a B camera that's super low and a little awkward and weird. But let's also do that on Jason's side. But Steve might only use one of those depending on who had the power in the moment. And, a lot of that happened also with Joy and Linda. But yeah, and in the earlier shows, maybe we shot a little too much coverage, but I think I always heard from the editors that they had plenty.
Yeah. I mean, how do you personally approach using either DTF or Good Luck as an example, maybe a scene you're particularly proud of, but how do you approach coverage of people talking? I mean, even, in DTF, you're saying you wanted angles that were a little more, I don't know, abstract or something, but it's very easy to just, cross coverage or just do what I colloquially have called the Fincher stack, but whatever you want to call, just the two sitting on top of each other and whatever. How do you break out of that mold? Is it just time and preparation, or is there, when you get in a room, do you see something more than just what you would conventionally walk in and do for, again, a documentary or something?
I think it's a bit of both. Like it's that planning, it's, some experience knowing what I can get away with on the day. But yeah, I prefer the Fincher stack, if we're going to call it that, over the cross coverage.
I doubt he invented that, but that's where I learned it.
Yeah. But that's often what we'll do is we'll say shoot a medium over the shoulder, and then I'm always trying to get another camera in there for Steve because you're getting overlapping performance then, which I think editorially is much better than cutting. And we might do, like, if it's a 5-page scene, you might do 2 or 3 setups, right? So like a medium wide and a sort of tighter of that, then move in and do a close that's maybe a clean, and then maybe do a profile if you want it, and then a wide, right? So, and it sounds ordinary, but I think, and maybe it is, like in the case of Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die, Gore works in a very different way. So he plans every single shot of every single day. That doesn't mean there's not room for improvement by me or other people in the crew, camera operators, whoever it might be. But there is a shot plan, whether or not he and I have storyboarded the frames on the weekend before, a month before, or he shows up the day of with 2 empty pieces of cardboard and starts drawing 15 minutes before call time. And, you see him over there noodling, doing that while I'm getting some stuff in place. And then safety meeting is brought together, and we all hear the safety meeting. And then Gore presents his plan to the crew for the day. Is like, this is what we're going to do. And sometimes he'll circle parts of it in blue and say, these shots are that direction, this shot's that direction, that shot requires visual effects. And then he opens it up to the floor and says, who wants to start where? And kind of opens it up to everybody. Art department to say, well, this, prop department to say, this prop won't be ready until 1 o'clock. Or me to say, let's shoot this in the morning, then in the afternoon. Or whoever has, we got to get 250 extras ready, so let's not shoot this now. Give me a little time. But his shot structure is much. Sometimes we do opposing reverses, but it seemed like he was editing much more in his mind and knew exactly the moments he needed. So we wouldn't always shoot the opposing reverse. We would just shoot, like if there's a punchline or a real meaningful moment that's meant to be given to the audience at the end of it, like that's here on one character. We don't shoot the opposite of that. You know what I mean? So I think it's different for every director.
Yeah, that makes me think, like, obviously with a seasoned expert like Gore, are you still shooting? I imagine you're still shooting like commercials and stuff on the side. Got to make money.
Yeah, for sure.
What are the, assuming you are working with like younger directors, what are some of the things that you've noticed that someone like Gore might do that a younger director should be doing, that maybe as a DP you should look out for? Is like, all right, keep note of that. That might go wrong. Like as a personal, personal, you watch mistakes and you're like, all right, well, I've seen that, and okay, just keep an eye on that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that's a really good question. I don't know if there are any mistakes. There are things that I definitely would not be excited about. For example, I don't love it when you bring in actors with no plan and just say, okay, show me what you guys would do. You know what I mean? Because that just opens yourself up to a lot of exposure for mistakes, like light being the wrong direction, getting problems with the line that, often takes time to work out. At least, like, as a basic, I hope people show up with, like, I find that, and I know a lot of directors don't, but I find that the best, most successful scenes have been when a director shows up with at least an idea of where they would like people to stand from the beginning, and for a reason. And ideally, the director and I have had time to discuss that before the moment of, so that I can pitch in, well, this is great, but like, what if we do this? Then I can offer you, this sort of background versus this sort of, put a person against a flat wall never looks great. Or, there's a lot I can recommend as opposed to getting stuck. Because we're always, at the end of the day, we're always up against a clock. It doesn't matter what it is. We're always against the clock. And, it doesn't take long for actors to work you into. By the way, I love actors, love working with actors. And I think most of them like to be guided as well for the exact same reason. Ben Kingsley on Perpetual Grace would tell Steve, please limit me. Because, it's a free room. If you give me a stage, I'm going to do whatever I want. And then it doesn't take long.
Kingsley.
Yeah, exactly.
He'll take the room.
Yeah. It doesn't take long before all of a sudden you discover you need 11 pieces of coverage and you've got 2 hours to shoot it.
Right.
And so that can be a real trick. But, in commercials, I find, with younger directors or older directors, most commercials, have agencies and clients, and there's a proven you have to present exactly what we're going to shoot. It's very rare that you don't walk into a commercial set where you've got, these are the 12 storyboards we've got to do today or whatever it is, Of course, there's room for communication and making things better, of course, but like everybody knows the goal. So it's rare I see commercial directors get into trouble in that regard. Yeah. And listen, there's commercial directors I work with that are unbelievable at blocking actors. Some of my favorite directors are commercial directors. That, just fantastic, incredibly artistic people. I love working in that medium too.
Yeah, it's somewhere. It's a thing I have yet to broach, and I'd like to. What's funny is the past 3 some odd years, I've been working on 4 documentaries, like 2 features and 2 short ones, and none of them have come out yet. So I'm in that perpetual, you're only as good as your last gig, but my last gig hasn't come out in 3 years. So I'm like, especially in a downturn, I'm like, all right, well, it'll look really cool when these all come out and people are like, oh, he's getting work. Let's get him. I hope. But commercials are definitely interesting to me because of, as you're saying, A, the structure, but B, at least from my perspective, I might be a weird person here, but like a lot of times, if you want to talk about sameness, a lot of commercials can look the Super Bowl is just like everyone's in a living room. There's that fast push in at the beginning. There's some wides that are low. There's that hot sun coming through the light. There's a lot of color, and I kind of mentally enjoy the idea of like, well, if that's the brief you're given, if that's what they really want, and it is a Super Bowl commercial, so you're not changing it. Like that paint by numbers thing could be, I don't know if less stressful is the right word, but just like an interesting, like, oh, all right, just fucking put this IKEA together. Like, let's have fun. Let's, no problem.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the case, but that's how it seems from the outside.
Well, I think, honestly, I think this is actually something I've been working on lately because I've shot thousands of commercials. And I'm guilty of what you're talking about. And that is that, some of my stuff ends up looking like everything else that's on the air. Part of that is that it's very rare that a cinematographer is included in the final color.
Right.
And these days, it's pretty rare that directors are also included in final color. So it's like you have somebody color the shoot that had no idea what the intention was of the filmmaking on the day. And we work with, there's super high-end colorists. So sometimes that works out fantastically. But I guess what I was getting to is one of the things I've been looking at and thinking about a lot is when shooting commercials, the problem I think we deal with so much with commercials is we don't have a backstory. Do you know what I mean? Like all we get is this commercial. We're told that these people sitting in a living room, as you're talking about, this is the situation we're coming in. But we have no idea anything about how we got here. So it's not like we developed a look for this thing based on an entire 2-hour film or 9-episode series. We're literally just coming on into this room with not a lot of information. So I've been actually working on, either developing my own backstory. So that helps me give something a look that feels to me right. Or, I'll talk to the director about it. Or maybe if I've got a good relationship with the agency and the director isn't threatened by that, I can ask that question as well. But I do think like when you're just asked to go in, and it's supposed to be sunny and morning, that's all you know. It's hard to be, definitive with a look.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like when actors will like make an entire backstory about a character that is never written, is never brought up, and it's literally just for them to inform like maybe the way they do one specific thing in one scene. Yeah, but I feel like audiences can feel that.
I agree.
They're good at reading not true subtext, but just like that there is something else in that universe is the wrong word, but universe that can be reached into a little bit more.
I agree 100%. Yeah. I think with the actors, that's a whole nother thing. And 100% agree. It's just like, how do you find depth within this character when all I've got is this one scene?
Yeah. I did going back to the idea of compositions, obviously you had mentioned a bunch of times that I wrote down the photographer over here. What was the Jean-Claude Dutch? I assume it's Dutch.
Jean-Claude Deutsch. I think it's
Deutsch.
probably, I don't know.
Deutsch. Yeah.
Oh my God, that's just gonna stick with me. Thank you for that. That's just
yeah. My bad, Jean-Claude. But I was looking up some of his photographs, and I recently purchased a Leica, so now I'm a real DP. And but it's a film one. I don't know why you'd get a digital one necessarily, but that has, sometimes the equipment does inform what you do, and now I'm like taking that thing everywhere because it's so small. You're zone focusing. You're just like, ooh, and then maybe it comes out. But I've definitely understood where you're going with that, and like some of the Todd Hido stuff. The misty kind of.
Yeah.
Were there any other photographers for DTF that you were referencing, or just in your life that you kind of looked at photographically and went like, yeah, that's a little bit of me?
I mean, I'm constantly looking at photographers. I mean, there's so many, but boy, I'm going to completely blow this too because there's so many. But it's often street photographers. It's like I love fashion and art photography. I really do. But it's often street photographers for me because I think it's an art that I don't fully grasp. I'm actually, I've been working really hard over this last few months on my own street photography, trying to understand that, trying to become better at it.
That's why I brought it up. That's why I bought the Leica, because I was like, I'm not, you can't do it with a DSLR. It feels wrong.
Yeah, it does. And well, you and I should go ahead and do a little photo hang.
I'd love to. That'd be phenomenal.
Super fun. Let's do it.
I have a much more open schedule than you, so you say the word.
But yeah, it's something, it's this idea that, well, first of all, I think, getting to the Jean-Claude Deutsch, for example, like, I don't think that was a stolen moment. That very much was a setup shot with Sharon Tate sitting at Le Deux Margot in Paris in 1967, and she was there very much on intention, and he was there to take her photo. But it feels like a stolen moment. And I think that's what I was going for with DTF St. Louis. And yeah, we referenced Todd Hido mostly because of those misty sort of backgrounds. So cinematographers love Todd Hido's work because of that sort of atmospheric quality to it. And, when we find David Harbour's character dead in a pool house 13 minutes in the first episode, it's an atmospheric situation. And we go back to that in episode 9 for the finale of that, we just loaded that place full of smoke and backlit it in ways that feel a little bit Todd Hido-ish. So that was just something for us, Steve and I, to look at and talk about. Gregory Crewdson.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah. Gregory Crewdson was a big reference for me and kind of always is, to be honest with you. And I think the reason why Gregory Crewdson is such a big influence on me and maybe many cinematographers is because his work it literally references the film business. He sets his shots up with entire film crews, stills that are invented, cast. There are condors with lights. There's massive lighting crews, and he lights them like we light movies. So we reference
He's a one-frame
him.
DP.
Yeah, and he references us. So I've loved that about his work. But, we looked at that a lot for Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die. There's Cartier-Bresson. There's, a big one for DTF and also Perpetual Grace's Saul Leiter.
I was literally just into, when you were done, I was going to be like, I'm a big Saul Leiter guy. I got a few of his books,
Yeah, exactly. Look. There's one right here.
Oh, damn. Oh, you got the good one, though. I got, some of them get hella expensive. Yeah, they're not facing me right now. But like I said, if I move the camera 6, this whole coffee table behind me, I've run out of shelf space. So it's just stacks of
that's great.
Photo books. And
I think we all should be studying, photography and art and go stand in museums and see what what grabs you. You know what I mean? It's like for Patriot, the main reference for Patriot was one image. There was a painting of a self-portrait of Van Gogh when he was very sick at the end of his life. Had a lot of green painted into his skin with warm tones offsetting it. And that became like, that's how I want all of Europe to look whenever we do Europe looks. So sometimes it grasps onto one image, and then other times it's many images or like one film. Yeah.
Yeah. Who's that? There's a photographer that will like hide a flash on the street and just wait for people to get right into where the flash is going to pop and then I can't remember the person's name.
Is it Philip Lorca de Corsia?
Yeah, there you go. Like
Yeah.
that type of stuff. I'm like, that would be the type of street photography I would be most interested in. It's kind of like the Sharon Tate photo where it's like just enough artifice to make it feel super intentional when in reality you did steal it. Like I love that kind of thought.
I was reading about, I think it was Cartier-Bresson I was reading about the other day, and he would talk, very little of his work, even though it all feels stolen, like grabbed in the moment, was that way. He would find a location that photographed well, then he would go there 10 times to find what light he loved, and then he'd go there 20 times to get the right person to walk through the shot. And that wasn't set up. It would be a stranger, but, and I just think the intention of that is unbelievable. And I think that's kind of the way we approach DTF in a way. It's like we have these actors, we tell them where to stand, sure. But the idea was that we were trying to make it feel like maybe there was an observer in a neighborhood that was grabbing these moments. It wasn't meant to feel overly set up. It was meant to feel always natural light, even though it was far from that. It was more about taking away light than adding light, for sure.
That does seem to be the thing now with digital, right? It's way more, it feels like a lot of people are leaning more grippy than lighty. And I'm wondering, like, part of me is kind of wondering, like, if I get a couple shoots, should I just throw a crap ton of ND on there and just make it hard for myself and have to light it? You know what I mean? Like make it more theatrical almost. Just because, I do see audiences going like things look flat, which again, I do not agree with. But if it's like, if that's what they want and I'm doing a project that's like not, I get asked for my friends to do random crap for them all the time, and I'm happy to do it. So it's like, if they don't care what it looks like, then I can just use it as an experiment. I've been thinking about like, do I just do that? Do I just like hard light everything and just start at a really low, like equivalent, like 100 base ISO and try to etch everything out?
That's interesting.
Do it the old school way.
Yeah, it sounds like fun. I mean, the thing I think that we all feel from film is that it had a really strong black. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of one of the things I was going for in DTF, was like to make sure we had a really strong sort of printy quality black to it. So that starts with a LUT, right? A LUT that has a baseline black level really far down, and then you light from there. But stylized lighting is super fun for sure. Like, it's not for everything. So it's got to be for the right project. Yeah. And I think if it makes sense for the right project, then that's great. But as far as like taking away light versus adding light, it's all about ratios, right? And so it's also for me, like, I don't like pingy highlights. And in nature, when you're outside, for example, that can happen because of a million things, a white house across the street, whatever it might be, a car that's 2 blocks away, you know what I mean? So I end up just building walls of negative around our actors because I'm taking away highlights like that, but also blocking incidental light, as well as like green bounce off of the grass, taking away all that stuff, and then adding sort of a minimal amount of bounce for balance. But this isn't really a new thing because of digital. It's, I think about John Toll's work and the Thin Red Line.
Yeah.
And his work, he would hang massive, massive sheets of black in those jungles to take away light coming from the front, because then that makes the highlight that's on the back of your shoulder and on the top of your head win, right? Because you expose more for the shadow, those things go brighter. And his work on that movie was so stunning. Mm-hmm. But it's just an old theory, really.
Yeah. With DTF, did you, you talked for a second there about the LUT, but what was the intentionality with that LUT? Because obviously the lighting is like you said, very shaped, I guess the ratios are very shaped, but how much of the look was in that LUT and how much was that LUT just kind of setting your base contrast and I guess a bit of a color shift? Or were you even just doing the color shift in camera?
It was pretty neutral. Yeah, we would add slight CDLs on top of the LUT. I mean, the base LUT essentially was pretty neutral as far as color goes. The black level was pretty down. And then one thing I always like to put into my LUTs is a small amount of negative saturation, some desaturation, because I find that one thing most cameras are not great at, and maybe the Alexa's slightly better at it, is skin tones. And all of us have kind of blotchy skin, right? Like a little more red here, a little more blue there.
You're telling me.
Exactly. So that tiny bit of saturation, desaturation, like 10 to 20%, maybe 15%, that range, built into the LUT, immediately gets skin tones into a really nice place. And then I build on top of that. And then we would cool things down. We kind of had like a base rule for DTF, which was that sort of everything pre-David Harbour dying, all the flashbacks and all that was slightly warmer. There were memories, right? Slightly warmer, happier moments. And then, when you get to him after he died, things were slightly cooler and maybe even slightly more cool from there when it came to the police, detectives, investigations and all that. But we broke those rules, like every rule we broke. It also was, we did, the flashbacks were also mostly handheld. The investigative part of the show was mostly static, more static with the camera. But we broke those rules. It's like, I don't believe in being steadfast in rules.
All right. So when you're breaking rules, how do you know when that's a rule or a time not to break the rule? Because otherwise, it'd just be visual chaos. If you're like, oh, we're always shooting, everything's going to have an overhead. And then you're like, except for these 5 scenes.
Yeah.
When do you know?
Yeah.
Gut?
Yeah, it often was gut on DTF especially, and it often was Steve's idea that, and I would challenge him. This would be a place like, are you sure? Because we're in flashback, we should be handheld. And he'd be like, I don't care. Let's put it on sticks, And he would often give me a reason, like, and I can't remember a great example of it right now. I mean, an obvious place that we broke that rule was when, at the very end of episode 1, there's kind of a flashback of when Jason meets Linda for the first time. He's talked about it just previous to this in an interrogation room. It was kind of like a holding cell in the police department where Richard Jenkins is kind of grilling him, and he's like, well, cornhole. And then he starts talking about this cornhole party, and that's where he met Linda for the first time. And we broke that rule very intentionally, and we shot slow motion on it too. But like, we used almost a Petzval lens as his point of view of Linda, and that was a big break, and it definitely was not handheld.
Yeah, the in regards to that, I've got notes over here, and so I got
it's everywhere.
Good. But you've been an advocate for larger sensors. I personally agree. Big sensor good, mostly because you can get the edge of lenses that aren't quite covered. It gets real fun.
Yeah.
But is there anything else about the larger formats that bring you joy or that you like? Because I think especially with like the Odyssey being out and stuff, there seems to be a lot of younger filmmakers who are confused because they're comparing everything on the same screen on their phone. Oftentimes they're only thinking ratio. They're like, can't I just I can shoot the Super 35 and just crop the sides. It's the same thing. You're like, that's not the same thing.
Right.
What is it about advocating for those, not advocating, but what do you enjoy about those the larger sensors? Because it is slightly different than larger film.
Yeah, it's true. It is. And that actually, I saw the Odyssey yesterday, so that'll be...
Oh, wow.
That's an interesting debate because, IMAX, Odyssey, sure, epic, fantastic. While I was watching the movie, I was thinking about Ben-Hur and Bridge Over River Kwai and movies like that. but is it more epic than a David Lean movie? I'm not sure. I kind of don't think so, to be honest with you. So there are things about large sensors like the super shallow depth of field, if you want to shoot wide open, in the way they used it on IMAX and in the Odyssey and also in Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer, I personally preferred a little bit better because not everything was shot in IMAX. And so when you got some of those portraits really popped out in that, those great close-ups of Cillian Murphy, where it was just like, wow, this is a really special shot. It really stood out. Whereas in Odyssey, every close-up was that way. So it's an interesting thing. And I'd love to pick Hoyta's brain about it for hours, for sure. When it comes to large format for what we're talking about, we shot on Alexa's 265, which is a very large sensor digital camera. And what you get is what you're talking about is you get this massive sensor that very few lenses can cover the entire sensor in a quality traditional way, right? So
in a scientific way.
In a scientific way. You don't get a beautiful field of view where it's edge to edge, sharp on everything. And that's what I love about it. Like that's where, like as you say, the fun starts, right? It's like the edges start falling off. And for us, it's not just fun, it's actually part of the storytelling, because the portraiture is the reason why I chose this camera. Is once we knew we were going to be on these faces, trying to learn about these people's everyday lives and what they were dealing with and struggling, I knew we were going to be shooting tons of portraits. And the camera itself does that with a whole bunch of different lenses. But if you pick lenses and pair it with the camera that have edge fall off, then you get additional things that lead your eye toward the center of the frame where the character will mostly be or slightly off center. So that's what's fantastic about it. And it worked really well for this series. Now, it's the only series I've shot that way, and I'm not sure I'll ever shoot that way again. Every show's different. So, but I do think it's a really beautiful format for sure.
Have you been able to get your hands on that Fujifilm, the Eterna yet?
I've not. And you're a Leica shooter. I'm a huge Fuji shooter.
So they're not there. I mean, my other cameras, I have got the X100. I've got a 50R.
Wow, cool.
I just sold my XT3 because I found that like if I'm ever going to get asked to shoot photos professionally, I'll just use the 50. I don't need, I got the XT3 as an emergency camera because at the time I was only shooting film. I had an RZ67 and I had to shoot the Russo brothers. It was like, it's the only time I've ever been hired to shoot a photo. And it was like this massive sort of almost Vanity Fair style, like big couch of people. And it was like the Russo brothers and Palmer Luckey and like a bunch of other people in the industry. And I only had my RZ and they needed like 50 photos. And so they were like, how much is this going to cost? And I was like, started asking all my like photographer friends, like, all right, so you've got to shoot. They wouldn't tell me who it was. They just said a lot of high value clients and it's going to be like 9 of them. So and they were like, I don't know, like $5,000. And I was like, all right, cool. So then I just bought an XT3 and I was like, I can use it for video too. Great.
Right.
And,
yeah.
I was proud of those photos.
I mean, they're all great cameras.
But yeah, the Fujifilms are great. But the Eterna, same thing, big ass, tall. It's, I believe at the moment, the tallest sensor you can get.
Right. That's
so great for anamorphic and stuff. I like that camera. It's got a few, I think a version 2 is going to be fully fleshed out, but.
I would think, yeah. I mean, to me, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, all of these cameras, all these cameras are still trying to improve. The trick is to not take away the great things about it. For example, I personally don't like the Alexa 35 as much as I do the Mini LF and the cameras before it. I think that new sensor feels sharper and more digital to me. And it's just a feeling, and I know that's going to be highly unpopular. But the 265 is the old sensor.
Yeah.
It's the Mini LF sensor with the color science of the Alexa 35. And I think that's really interesting. But yeah, for example, Sony's working really hard to get better highlights for the Venice. And I think the Venice 2 is an amazing camera.
I literally just wrote, I had this theory about photos. To let me know if this gets way too, are you a very technical person?
I'm not nearly as many of my colleagues.
I wasn't either, but I had this theory that bigger photo site always meant better cinema camera. Because the article started as like, when did cinema and photo converge in the digital era? And I thought my thesis was going to be, and cinema sensor better because it's always got bigger photo sites, a la the ALEV3 sensor from the original Alexa. And come to find out that is not the case. It is the case, but it's not, because you've got your Venices that have way more pixels, but still resolve in a very pleasing way. But it doesn't surprise me that you like the old sensor technology, because it does have the largest photo sites of any camera on the market, more or less. And it does seem to handle light a lot more organically than when you're trying to super sample an image down to like fix the physics problems.
It's an interesting thing, you know. For me, it always comes down to a feel. You know what I mean? It's like I just said, the Alexa 35. I've used it in commercials. I've not used it on a show yet, and I have used it on a show, like for very small things on the last show I shot, also on DTF St. Louis. But it's just something you feel, you know. It's like, and you can't fight it. You know, I've got friends who are doing incredible work on the Alexa 35, so I know it's possible, and I'm sure I would do good work on it too. But like, there's something that, well, I think part of it is also the large format of it, right? It's the medium. It's the Mini LF has a bigger sensor than the 35, so I love that look.
Yeah, with the sensor itself, it's, for me at least, it's just the smoothness of the gradations. And it's not a true super sampling, but like when you have a bigger sensor and it gets put into a 2K DI or whatever, it has a smooth sharpness, I guess, versus like I guess what we would call a digital sharpness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, because I think the depth of field thing is far overblown. Like, you don't, like you said, you don't have to shoot wide open. That is an option. You know, some people love it, but you know, you've got the tools to shoot quote unquote normally, but the rendering of the image itself, I think with a larger sensor looks more organic or pleasing, I guess, to me.
Yeah, exactly. It's to you, right?
Yeah. And also I get real, I try to not talk shit about Sony too much, because all the internet will yell at me. So Sony makes the best cameras, don't you know? I did want to ask about the Jimmy practicals of it all.
Okay.
When how do you keep, you know, if this is something that I am not good at, which is why I want to ask, is like, obviously if you take a wide shot of a lot of sets, there's 400 lamps in a room, but when you're shooting angles, you only see one or two at a time, so it's fine. But do you have a not a rule book, but sort of a method to having practicals look good and not just a mix? Because especially in Good Luck, you know, there's a lot of different color temperatures and colors going around. How do you keep that from looking muddy?
Oh, wow. Interesting. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by, you mean because the practicals are different colors, it makes things
yeah,
look
like, because it would be easy to just chuck not just chuck, but you know, you put them all in there and you're filming with all those mixed color temperatures. It could look unintentional.
Mm-hmm.
Is it just a matter of making sure that the key light is like true, you know, quote unquote white, or you know, what's your method for mixing?
Yeah, I mean, like for example, on Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die, there's a lot of night scenes that are, you know, we kind of played off of heightened version of night, right? Which is more like the Greg Crutzen, like super warm sodium vapors and super green metal halide fixtures, and then basing off of that. But we would, you know, for key lights, I'm not a big fan of lighting sort of neutral. I think neutral's kind of boring. I think it's kind of, that's personally my take on it. I like picking one of those colors, maybe slightly neutraling it a little bit, but don't go back to white. Like, but I do believe that there should be white in every frame. There should be something white in frame that your eye can grab onto, unless you're looking for something that is kind of murky and muddy and meant to feel low and dingy, which we did also on Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die. Like some of those alley scenes were meant to be extraordinarily dingy, and so we wouldn't use a true white point. But yeah, I use practicals liberally because I like working at super low light levels for one thing, and to have those practicals do some work for me is really helpful.
That's kind of the source of the question is when you are, when you've got a more sensitive camera, they can tend to pollute, whereas I don't think your images pollute.
Yeah. I mean, I think then you make choices. Like, I mean, there's definitely some stuff where it looks like a furniture store because I've got, 8 practicals in one shot. But
that's good though. I like it.
I mean, I just think it keeps your eye interested, And you're right, it's not in every single piece of coverage. And then it allows you to have a highlight in the background. And it allows you to motivate the light, the edge light, that slight edge light on you right now is coming from the window, but it could very well be coming from a practical. So,
yeah.
I don't know. That's my theory on practicals, I guess.
Sure. I just love I get Jimmy practicals.
Where did that come from? That's hilarious.
Let's see. I have the source here. It was your interview with Patrick Tommaso.
Oh, cool.
Or no, I guess maybe he took that. Did you talk to him?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Quite a few months ago then.
I have a transcript. I don't have the video, but I can never tell with certain YouTubers if they're just taking interview clips or if.
Right.
I've found when I'm doing research, I have to just use transcripts because I can't watch 5-hour-long interviews, So I just dump transcripts into a document and then I've got polls and stuff.
Right.
But yeah, I guess that's where you said it.
I do have one director, actually two directors in particular that do call me Jimmy Practicals. I have been known to be called Jimmy Practicals, not going to lie.
Not a terrible nickname as long as, it's not Jimmy Takes Too Long or...
There's a few nicknames, but yeah.
Jimmy Pisses Off the AD. Let's see we've already come to the end of the hour. That sucks. The one thing I always like asking is about, every job informs who you are as an artist. And with Gore and with I wrote it down. Not Scott, Steve.
Yeah.
Just on these last 2 projects, like what are some things you learned as a DP that will probably inform the next shoot, or maybe have?
Sorry, tell me the question again. Ask me the question.
Things you learned working for a Gore Verbinski or your longtime relationship with Scott. Like what are those things that you learned on these specific projects that probably have informed you as a DP going forward?
Yeah, I mean, the film with Gore was an everyday learning experience because I was learning a new director and one that's kind of a master at what he does. So it's like it was me learning his style, but also learning how to keep up with him as well. That movie, he was super interested in cutting for pace. So that meant to him that we needed an immense amount of coverage. So we would often do north of 40 setups a day. And
good Lord.
We did that for 60 days. So it was like an incredible amount of coverage. And we rarely got more than 15 minutes, maybe 10 minutes to do it the next setup. So, and he would do a fair amount of takes, which cut down our time. So if he wasn't sold on a performance, we might be in the 7 to 10 takes range after we're ready, after 10 minutes of lighting. And then he was like, we're rolling. You ready?
Yeah.
And that was, I think, specific to that film. He really wanted to be able to handle the pace of the movie with the amount of choices he had in the edit. And it was a tough movie. We were in South Africa, cheating LA, Norm's Diners on La Cienega Boulevard right here in LA. And most of the movie happens within 8 blocks of that. So
you built the Norms in South Africa?
Yeah, that was a set that was built.
Oh, wow.
We built 2 blocks of La Cienega Boulevard within the soundstage so the cars could actually drive on it and we'd see real scenery outside the windows.
I thought for sure you actually shot that on location. I was like, I know that Norms.
That's great. We fooled you. I love that. That's great. With Steve, it's probably, I'm constantly amazed working with Steve because, I mean, it's not that I thought we shot one thing and then he delivered another thing when it aired, but it definitely is slightly different. And I stand in awe of how he cuts and how he adds music as an element to create mood. And so I think that'll make me question next time around. I think he is absolutely masterful in DTF, the way he used sound and music and just performance takes and which angles he chose, like we were talking about earlier, not doing the exact opposing angle as the next angle, you know? So that might make me ask more questions of him for sure. And then, you know, with both of these guys, DTF St. Louis, we did a lot less sort of shot planning before the day than we did on Patriot and on Perpetual Grace, which were mostly shot listed. We shot listed extensively on DTF for maybe the first month of prep, but then Steve, his world got so swampy, it became very difficult to find time with Steve. And so with Gore and for me and Steve on both of these projects, it allowed me to sort of become a more fluid cinematographer, be ready for everything, but don't expect that my plan is going to be, you know, we're not always going to have a plan. Let's be ready to shuck and jive a little bit, which was a useful tool. And so I think that's better for filmmaker for sure.
What, in your mind, what does be ready mean? Because obviously you could have everyone on standby to fly in every piece of gear on the planet. But what does that mean to you?
You know where the light's going to be when you show up at it. You know, it's like, don't figure out anything on the day. You can figure out the blocking on the day. But as far as what tools you need, and sometimes you have to have those conversations, even without a shot list. I have to say to Steve, you got to let me know when we need a techno crane to be there. Or, you know, but like in general, I know the scene's going to be outside. I know we're going to be stuck there in the middle of the day. So I need 2 fly swatters that are going to block the sun, maybe 3. Or for example, at the skate park, you know, unfortunately, we started the show kind of in January when the sun was super friendly and low and just breaking the tree line. And it was, you know, beautiful dapple that the sun would travel through. But by May, the sun was high and hard and nasty. And so the scenes in the skate park, and there are a few, were going to happen over 2 days, all day long. So that meant that Mike Rip and I needed to build a massive 60 by 60 or 80 by 80 sun cover above that skate park. And, you know, these are luxuries. You don't always have that on a budget, but, you know, it's working with production and making sure that they understand why you're doing that and trying to get them on board with that. And then, you know, just being ready just in general. with gear and people. And you hire the best people, not because they're your friends always, but hire the best people that are available because they're going to elevate you as a cinematographer.
I think that's something that I've noticed a lot of, again, because I'm constantly talking to younger filmmakers, is like, you don't have to have the right answer. You just have to okay the right answer. It doesn't need to come from you. Like, get people that are better than you, honestly. Like, then everyone will think you're amazing. You know, just as long as you 100%. Can execute and like manage people.
Yeah.
That, at least from my perspective, seems to be the majority of the job. Just having a good perspective.
Yeah, to have good taste, good perspective. And then the other thing that's really important in my wheelhouse is showing up with calm. You know what I mean? Just like constantly being calm. There can be chaos happening around you, but if I start to show chaos, my crew is going to get grumpy. It's going to be a much less fun working environment for everybody. People are going to be less excited to come to work on a daily basis. That's true with the director too. But Steve runs the most smooth set. So I try to do that with every set I'm on, but working with Steve, it makes it really easy because he sets that tone and then I can just follow it and then everybody follows it. And then it's just a nice, nobody runs. That's one of the rules on our sets. Nobody runs.
Pool rules.
Yeah, kind of pool rules. I like that.
Yeah, no diving.
No diving. They're actually, that pool we shot at, that's right outside of the pool house where you find David Harbour's body.
Yeah.
There is, and that was a real pool. We didn't build it. You know, there's those markers that show the depth. At the very shallowest end, it said 0 foot 0 inches. And I was like,
okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's accurate.
No diving.
No time. Well, it was absolutely phenomenal talking to you. I
You too.
absolutely flew by, but I'm relatively confident accolades will be coming your way for this show.
Thank you.
And I believe they are well deserved. I'll let you go. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Sweet. Thanks,
Cool.
man. See you.
Take care.
Frame and Reference is an Albot production, produced and edited by me, Kenny McMillan. If you'd like to support the podcast directly, you can do so by going to frameandrefpod.com and clicking on the Patreon button. It's always appreciated, and as always, thanks for listening.